How's it going, right? This is Rob Novakast back with another video. And with this one, well, okay, I'll be perfectly honest. I was contemplating whether or not to do it, but I was getting a lot of notifications on my stuff, on my YouTubes. And to an extent, I saw a few videos related to this topic. And honestly, I figured I kind of, give my own take on it. Quantum TV. For those who don't know, Quantum TV is an individual who claims himself to be a reviewer, although some of the takes he has on TVs, video games, etc. are not the best. In fact, he's been debunked a couple times by other TV reviewers, as well as being debunked by people who play video games. So, he did a video recently on God of War, and we are going to look at it. Now, of course, I can't show the video, or at least I'm not going to, more so because, I could show the video, but Quantum TV has a tendency to copyright claim and strike people's videos that use any of his content. So, to an extent, enjoy the loop of a funny gif of Kratos throwing a computer in a dumpster. Hey, it's related to what we're talking about. So, in the end, it's a perfect choice. I have sped up the video, too, for the audio, so that way we can get through some of the points a little bit quickly. As quickly as we can, anyway. But, anywho, let's go ahead and get started.
God of War. Today I'm going to be giving you a review on it. Now, a lot of people have kind of already picked what side of the aisle they're going to be standing on. They either like the game or really hate the game for various reasons. I'm just going to be giving my take, since reviews are subjective. Take it for what it is. You don't have to agree with me. You can disagree all you want. And again, you can always agree. But
now, first, I want to say this is kind of ironic because, to an extent, again, Quantum TV has a particular history with striking or copyright claiming people's videos. No, actually, no, sorry. Let me rephrase. Falsely copyright claiming people's videos that talk about him, or at least discuss or rebuttal any of his videos. So, to a degree, yeah, this whole thing of like, oh, it's your opinion, it's my opinion. That means jack shit to you when it comes to the other side. So, anywho.
I think we should talk about this game because I think it's actually pretty good and pretty bad at the same time. We'll talk.
You can't have something that's good, both good and bad. You can either have it good and with a few minor issues, or it could be just completely awful and have that one thing that was good. Like Hanakimi. Some of you guys who have watched our channel know exactly what I'm talking about.
Talk about why. So if we look at the box art, it's kind of like...
Okay, first, he's talking about box art. I want to quickly show this. Okay. So this is the box art. Now, I think I got the same box for my game. And it reads, embark on an epic and heartfelt journey as Kratos and Atreus struggle with holding on and letting go. Against a backdrop of Norse realms torn asunder, witness the changing dynamic of the father-son relationship as they prepare for war. Honestly, it's a very simple cover, and to an extent it shows, I don't think that's like a digital image or painted image. It looks like it's a screenshot directly from the game. All in all, it looks good, it's simple, and gets to the point, especially with like a lot of books. Like, let's say, like, using books for an example, sometimes they have a quick like explanation of what the book is about. That's perfect. And in the corner you have the bonus content. I think it's simple, gets to the point, and kind of makes you interested. Alright, going back to the GIF.
Man, there's not like a whole lot of crazy graphics going around, and I don't know, maybe I'm a little old school, but I like back in the day when they used to do that cool little thing, how they used to kind of put little cutscenes to show you what the game would be like, certain aspects of gameplay that they're highlighting. I wish they would have done that. Most games don't do that nowadays, so I guess we'll let that one go. But if we talk,
I feel like that's a minor gripe, and I feel like he's putting more, or he's like putting too much detail into it. I remember those kind of covers for a lot of games where You have like little snippets of like screenshots of what the game looks like, how it's played, and so on. However, I think a lot of people have heard the phrase "don't judge a book by its cover," and just because it shows snippets of the game for the back of the cover to kind of show you what it's about, does not mean the game is good. And I don't think that should be a reason to hate the game, for the cover to not be as showy as as it is for other games. Because again, a game that shows a lot may not even be any good when you start playing it. So I don't think griping on the cover is a smart thing. Me personally, anyway, because that's my opinion.
About further onto the additional offerings of the bonus characters and what they offer. So I guess maybe you can be happy if you like the color white and black.
Wait a minute, hold on. Did you guys listening in? Because he starts talking about bonus characters, but then goes straight to he's changing the subject. And then for those who don't, you guys can't see it. He's talking about characters, and then goes straight to talking about the bonus content, which for pre-order, it was the Kratos, or it was the Risen Snow armor and tunic for Atreus and Kratos, which looks cool, but I don't use because the stats aren't good for me.
Gold as I don't know, he's a Spartan, so I would have expected maybe an exclusive Spartan outfit, maybe the OG skins to be a pre-order bonus, but to see this kind of it's a colored version of an armor piece that is literally already in the game, and it just doesn't really feel very unique or exclusive. It kind of removes any real desire to pre-order in the first.
So there's something. If I could say one thing about the armor, is again, it may look similar to another piece of armor, which, by the way, there's from what I can gather, from playing it, there's one particular piece that has stages of different levels of quality, which, by the way, sometimes that happens. But you gotta look at, instead of looking at just aesthetic, look at the I guess the points that it's supposed to, what strengths or buffs or debuffs does it give you? Does it increase your strength, your defense, your luck, your vitality? That's the more, I think when it comes down to it, that's the more important thing. I like how some of the armors look, but that's not my main focus, because with a game like this, I'm always looking at what the armor does for me as the player. Do I need more luck? Do I need more strength, more vitality? That's the more important thing, not just how the armor looks.
First place. So the pre-order bonus is definitely a little weak in my opinion there.
That's depending on whether or not you got that pre-order, or if anything, you got the. I bet he's butthurt because he didn't get the really expansive God of War Master Collection or whatever. Which honestly, I didn't get it, but it's pretty cool. What they have for I think it was a statue or two statues of Atreus and Kratos, and a bunch of other stuff. So, anywho.
The install size for God of War is basically 84 gigs if you're on PlayStation 5. And
that's like any game, by the way. He's complaining about size of the game, but in the end, that's how any size for any game is at this point. You got to understand too is the bigger the better quality of games, or when it comes down to quality, frame rate, so on, the more quality you put into something, the bigger it's going to be. It's to an extent where you have let's say okay, perfect example. When I record videos, depending on what frame rate I use, what graphic size, whether it be 1080p or 4K, that matters, because to an extent that will determine, or at least by the end of the recording, that will increase or create an extensive and very large video file, depending on what I do for my settings. So to a degree, you got to understand that more likely due to quality, the frame rate, story, characters, everything that's put into the game, and especially since it's an extensive game, it's gonna be a large size for playthrough.
If you're on PS4. Now, this is again in line with what we've seen, so we can't really be too critical here. Games are just going to be really large, so you're going to have to invest in storage. Though I will say it is annoying to see that the game is this big and the graphical improvements aren't really kind of in line with the game of this size.
That's BS. But go on.
More on that later. Taking to the main menu, you can kind of see a couple different things. I mean, you have the typical story elements and options, but there's nothing really unique, right? And I think this is where these...
What is he talking about? I'm trying to understand that, because first off, when you first play the game, especially for the new players, there's a story recap where it kind of goes over a quick synopsis of what happened in the previous game, which I do appreciate when games do that now. Because in case you just go straight into playing God of War Ragnarok, you could do a quick story recap and you can see what happened in the previous game. And that in turn, like if you like this game, like God of War Ragnarok, you may want to go back and see the other game.
Story games kind of, for a lot of people where we heard a lot of the negativity come from, kind of play into part, because typically when you have a game that's story driven, the only thing that matters in a story game after the story is beaten is its replayability, the replay value. This game, like many other story games, have very little replay value because it's just repetitive and it doesn't really do a whole lot to change that.
Not really. I mean, granted, I'm gonna say this. Currently, as I record this video and I upload it, there isn't a New Game Plus yet, so that sucks. However, there is a chance for you to play content before and after the story ends, and I'll explain. So, let's say you complete the story missions. Throughout the world, there are a variety of different side quests that you can take part in, and a lot of conversations that you can have between the characters like Atreus and Freya. So, in the end, depending on how you play, what characters you're accompanied with, you'll have a variety of different things that happen within the game. My personal favorite moments, again, because this is a story-based game, which I don't know why you're griping about that, and it was a very good one, I should say, because there's a lot of things that I appreciate with this game, is a lot of the minor details that they didn't have to put in, but at the same time they still did, because they want to put as much detail and lore into this game. There's really great moments with Mimir, where he is asking Kratos about his homeland, and to an extent, at one point they talk about the Spartans. They talk about the Hot Gates from I think it was like the 300 Legion of Sparta, which is pretty cool. There's a point where I don't want to go into too much detail, but there is a point where Kratos is discussing, like, literally going into his past. This is something he wouldn't do, but in order to kind of relate to an individual, he goes into his past. He talks about Calliope. He talks about Deimos. He talks about, which, by the way, I haven't played the games. I know a little bit of the story, but I have not played the games, unfortunately. But yeah, he talks about Calliope. He talks about Deimos. He talks about living, or like becoming a Spartan. How the troubles that he had to go through in his younger years, and how he became to be known as the God of War, or the Ghost of Sparta. He goes into that, and that's, by the way, that is something that that this individual does not understand. Later in this video, he talks about that there's no point here, but ultimately, when you look into it, like as you're playing the game, there is a point. You realize that not just by looking at the lens of graphics and frame rate, you look at the story and you realize that this has really improved the Kratos character, or the character of Kratos for God of War. Changed him in a almost somewhat empathetic individual. Imagine that. A character who has once before had gone out of his way to basically stick a girl into trap a girl in chains, in gears, and allow her to get crushed so he can get to his next objective because he was so focused on killing the Greek gods, to somebody who is now empathetic and will actually, show mercy, or not show mercy, but to an extent will refuse to kill certain gods that have helped him, or certain people that have helped him, to be empathetic towards other people, to have a friendship with characters like Mimir and freaking and Brock. Hell, in a couple times, if you pay close attention, Kratos calls Mimir brother, which is something that Mimir would say to Kratos. So, to an extent, there is a lot to go with this game, but this guy isn't going to go into it because, I'm going to be perfectly honest, I don't think... I mean, in the video, we see, like, moments of the game playing in the background, but I start to think that maybe he hasn't actually played the game. And is only speaking, like, he saw a few things and then decided to do a review. But, that's again, that's my opinion.
It would have been nice to see, for example, a challenge mode of some sort included in the game as a separate option in the main menu, to where when you click on it, like old school games, there's all kinds of crazy challenges that really put your gear and your skills that you spent getting up to the test. And it just...
So, I mean, to an extent, you do have the different difficulties. I mean, this is something he'll also go into. There's the basic gimme story. I'm playing it on give me balance. I'm somebody who would usually just play for story, but I'm trying to challenge myself in this playthrough and playing give me balance, kind of going in between, seeing how well I do. And sometimes it is challenging, and in the moments that I die in the game, I'm literally having to change up my strategy, like thinking, okay, what works, what doesn't work? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I push out this quick freaking special? And you just kind of really push it, as well as paying close attention to the environment. Because I've noticed it a couple times that they have the indicator of when a character is going to attack or attack you from behind. So that's something that you really have to pay attention to. And to an extent, I've always made myself alert, or at least, again, changed my strategy as I play the game. So to an extent, there is challenge, and there's actually, if I remember correctly, in Niflheim, there is a location where you can basically train using, or at least facing off against old enemies, which is pretty cool. If you're looking into a challenge, like let's say finding the birds or finding the ravens, which rewards you with finding all the ravens, is pretty good. There's even moments where you're facing off against the, I think the berserkers, which to an extent are resemblance to the Valkyrie fights. So there is that as well. If I remember correctly, you do get to go back to Muspelheim too. So all in all, there is challenge. It's all depending on how you play it and whether or not you want to challenge yourself.
This doesn't happen that way. Another problem is, even though that game doesn't have some sort of replayability through challenge modes or other unique custom modes that we would have loved to see, it just does not have that replayability because it doesn't have chapters. I don't know how many games that are story driven they like to make where it's just a one playthrough and then you restart all over again. I think that kind of defeats the purpose, especially in a game plus mode, for example. I feel like, so you're already acknowledging I beat the game, I've already got all my stats, I've already got all my gear. Let me pick what chapter from what part of the game I want to play. The only way to do this is to have a pre-existing game save onto your drive and then play from that point.
I think to an extent, there is a point where, yeah, there was chapters, but I think with this particular game, I don't think it doesn't need it. More so because, again, it is a continuous story, and a lot of games, inevitably do that, where it is a continuous story where you don't go through chapters or replay certain chapters with characters. Again, it sucks that currently there's no New Game Plus, but in the end, there is replayability through, the story mission. After completing the story missions, you going back and, either finding items that you didn't find before, hunting down the birds, going after the berserkers, and doing some of the end game content. which is, you know, a lot of fun.
But that's kind of pointless because you're not always going to have a bunch of game saves, so I think that's really annoying. Now this next piece I took a lot of heat for, and I really don't care, because I still feel the same way. The pacing of the story is too slow.
How? Okay, which, by the way, it's an extensive game, and I think, if I remember correctly, this is, I think it was like over 40 plus hours for this game, which it begs the question, do you just want a short game? Does this guy just want a short game where you can breeze through it and waste $60 to $70 on? I wouldn't. I mean, I'm glad that some of these games are as long as they are. And by the way, let's talk about the pacing, okay? Let's talk about the pacing, because to an extent, yeah, there are moments where you talk, but the first hour of the game, what do? Sure, you start off with, you know, Kratos and Atreus hunting deer. Then all of a sudden, Freya shows up, attacks. After the attack, you have the situation where, which, by the way, spoilers if you guys have not played the game yet, but this is the first hour. After the attack with Freya, you have this emotional scene with Atreus. Afterwards, you go look for Atreus, find him, go back to the home, and you're attacked. Well, not immediately. You have a kind of intervention with Kratos, Thor, and Odin. And when Odin doesn't get the answer, he has Thor attack Kratos, which have a big old fight after that, which then continues on to you and Atreus hunting down Tyr. And once that happens, you start going through mission on mission to, you know, do a variety of different things to try to stop Odin, which is, again, really interesting. My point is, I personally don't think that there was any sort of pacing issues. At the gate, it's, you know, it's quick for the first hour, depending on, again, what level you're on, what level of difficulty you're on, you'll get through it in a decent manner. Because again, even though there's a lot that goes on in the first hour, you get through it.
Simply put, they spend too many hours on screen talking, to the point where a lot of people have called this a cutscene simulator.
Not really. I mean, to an extent, I don't consider it a cutscene simulator. I mean, simulator. I mean, to an extent, yeah, there's a lot of talking, but at the same time, there's a lot of lore that they try to bring in, as well as a lot of character development. That's another thing that you're not understanding, because again, you look at the eyes of in the lens of, you know, frame rate and graphics. That's your main focus. That's the thing you care about, which we're going to get into that in a second. But to an extent, your main focus is only that, not realizing that there is a lot of character development with, you know, Kratos and Atreus and a variety of different characters. There's an emotional scene that I don't want to get into that hurts a lot of gamers, because to an extent, this particular character assists you through thick and thin, and I'm just gonna say, no, actually no, I'm not gonna even spoil it. It's an emotional scene. I don't want to talk about it. And for those in chat who watch this video and know exactly what I'm talking about, don't talk about it. Don't spoil. But yeah, even though you say it's just a cutscene simulator, I see it as character development and a chance to see these characters, you know, go through thick and thin, you know, bonding together, learning more about each other, and at the same time, you become more emotionally invested in them. Which, isn't that the point of video games? To experience a story? Not just, oh, it's another cutscene. No, I'm not going to be, I don't think it's, especially when you're playing a video game, I don't think you should be that close-minded and think, oh, it's just another cutscene. No. At this point in time, especially since, you know, nowadays a lot of games have been, you know, portrayed as movies, at this point, it's a story thing. It really is. And I think that the strongest point about this game is the story.
It didn't really feel like you were being dropped into this action game. It felt a lot like it was a very slow opening of a movie, and not a very good one. And it's to the point where the pacing of the story has a very roller coaster vibe. It goes up, down. You don't really know like what's happening until they get to certain parts of the story, and you go, okay, that's what you're referencing here. It's just, I don't know. I didn't like the writing personally. I thought it had a lot of room for improvement until the latter half of the game. Now, once you get to about midway through the game, it's pretty engaging, and the action scenes are a lot more.
I think all throughout it's been good.
So the cutscenes are a lot more forgivable. But in that opening scene, you know, the boy with his wolf, you know, he's crying over the wolves, but then he has to fight a wolf, and it's just all this stupid, contradictory stuff.
Okay, no, that's stupid. That is beyond idiocy. Especially since, again, I need a drink of my tea. Yes, I'm drinking out a big bottle of Golden Peaks. But, okay. This point, I saw this point, and it kind of irritated me. Because, again, I don't think this guy is getting, when it comes down to it, like, really taking in consideration the story that is being told. Or, if anything, I don't think, my personal opinion, by the way, I don't think he's actually played the game. Because, to an extent, there's a difference from near the beginning, where you have Atreus, who, unfortunately, one of the first scenes, and it's mentioned right off the bat that his one of his wolves, Fenrir, is slowly dying and inevitably passes away. There's a difference between that, like a boy losing his dog, to having to fight off a giant ice wolf from freaking Helheim that is literally of danger to the 9 realms. And it's mentioned this, and it by the way, it's brought this entire detail is brought to light, well, by the characters, mentioning the fact that Garm, the wolf in question that Kratos and Atreus attack near the midsection of the game, is an ice wolf from Helheim that has the ability to tear through, the different realms. So, which is why it was in hell. It was locked up. It was chained up. And during a mission, Atreus naively let it loose. Now, they do correct this, but I'm not going to go into how. But in reality, again, there's a difference between, a boy losing his dog to unleashing a giant wolf from frozen hell that could be a possible danger to all of the 9 realms. There's a huge difference. There's no hypocrisy. There's a completely clear difference as to the whole situation. But again, you're not going to give them the details and give any explanations as to why, because there's a good chance you haven't played the game.
I just, from a writing perspective, did not appreciate it.
Again, more likely, I don't think you know anything about writing anyways.
Again, that's to each their own, but that's my take on that.
It's a bad take.
Forgettingly, though, I think is the way that the story kind of doesn't have a built-upon theme. And what I mean is like, okay, so in the last game...
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
He was a dad. We all know that. He's trying to build his son up and all that stuff. And now they're trying to establish the opening story again as him being a dad. We already know that, so don't spend the first half of the game establishing the fact that he's a father.
So, I like the fact that he claims that there's no theme, when in reality he just contradicts himself by saying the theme was he's a dad. But there's more to that. To an extent, you gotta realize too that at this point in the game's story, Atreus is a teenager. And not only that, but he's a teenager that has thoughts and feelings and wants to understand who he is and what his value is to the world. and what he can accomplish and what he's supposed to do. That's one of the main themes. Another thing that, to add on to this whole thing of the father-son bond, which, by the way, was on the cover, is that Kratos, now being a little bit more empathetic to his son, showing a little bit more emotion, is trying to deal with, or at least to an extent, trying to be a good father. Trying to protect his son. To do, and at this point, be supportive. Even though in certain situations, it seems like Atreus is lying to him. I think ultimately that's the point. Is Kratos, seeing that his son's grown up, wants to get out in the world, and Kratos being a typical dad, trying to support and defend his son. That is the ultimate situation, concept that is going on with the theme of the game, as well as dealing with Ragnarok, the end of the world for the Norse mythology.
We get it. But the whole game plays on the theme that he's a father, hence the name of this review, Dad of War. Even to the final boss, it's all about your children and being a dad.
That's another thing too. I don't want to go into too much, because I feel like I'm going to do that anyways. But ultimately, there is a theme. I mean, when going further, you notice that there is some similarity to Kratos and Thor. And to a degree, it's also referenced near the beginning of the game by Thor himself that they're both destroyers. That they both are supposed to act and feel a certain way. There's a point where in the fight he mentions he wants to see the real you, the real Kratos, the real God of War. And to a degree, Kratos, I'm going to be honest, I mean, even though it's a fight, it seems like he doesn't want to have a confrontation. Which, by the way, that's another thing. Kratos, again, the Greek God of War, the guy who massacred the entire Greek pantheon, at this point in time, does not want confrontation. One of the biggest things that comes up for the games itself is they need to be better for their children, and we see that Thor has had not only Magni and Modi, but he has Thrud, his daughter, and to an extent, he wants to be better. At least I'm talking about Thor, by the way. He wants to be better, but to an extent, due to certain issues I don't want to go into, which, by the way, adds more to the characters of Thor. He's a drunkard. He will get quick. He's quick to fight, and in the end, he wants to be better, but he can't. I am 30 minutes in, and I've only gone through half of this video, which, by the way, is only a 10-minute video. I have a lot to say.
Did we really need a Kratos like that? I don't think we did. Now, again, personal opinion. That's what a review is. Buddy.
You know what? I may be frank. I'm glad you want to say that you have your own opinions, but if you're gonna say that, be respectful for the other people that have opinions against you. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, I don't think you can, but I mean, especially since you claim to be a Christian man. Let's be perfectly honest, okay? You don't like it when other people have opinions about, your content. If you cared about opinions, then you should have no qualms with people talking about you. Period.
Again, I really can't stand the pacing of it, though. Now, the art style of this game can be characterized as one thing in my personal book. A little lazy.
Bullshit. It's not lazy.
Because if you really look at it, it just loses a lot of the high next-gen aspects that we were expecting. And to the point where you're in performance mode, there is no good reason why you can't be in performance mode at, say, 1440, 60 FPS with maxed out textures and resolution. It doesn't happen here. Now, I, again, similarly receive flack from players that love the game and apologize all of its flaws away.
That is a stupid remark. That is a bad take. So people who like the game automatically are just fanboys? Being seriously? That's ridiculous.
But I'm not one of those people. For me, I really would have liked them to implement some form of a high-resolution mode that has really tack-sharp visuals. Now, of course, you can always go into performance mode, but that runs at 30 FPS.
I think you guys know what I'm going to say. When I played on performance mode and it's 60 frames per second. And although my recordings are 1080p, 60 frames, which, by the way, actually, no, still, I am playing it on that. To an extent, it still looks good. Still plays good.
And that is a joke on next-gen consoles, so there's no point in using it if you're like me.
My point, by the way, is he's lying.
And you bought a PS5 for high frame rates. Which kind of goes into the next thing. The higher the frame rates, the worse the visuals get. That's just how the game plays. And I think for me, when you combine that in with the dated mechanics, it gets to be really lazy because it runs exactly like the last game from the way you move, you swing your axe, it's a copy and paste. I would have really loved to see some more of the fluid gameplay come.
I kind of find it funny where he says it's copy and paste, but he wants the same thing as like the previous games, making it copy and paste. At least for the Norse mythology, God of War, they did their best to try to make it different. Sure, you don't get a ton of weapons, you don't get a ton of powers, but to an extent, it limits you and allows you to, think outside the box and like strategize your every move when you play the game. And halfway through the game, or at least partway through the game, you do get a third weapon, which, by the way, for story purposes, compared to the chaos blades that were bestowed to him by Ares, or to an extent, the Leviathan axe, which was given to him by his wife, his late wife. This spear is his. This was crafted for him. So to a degree, he gets a weapon that wasn't stolen from an enemy, that wasn't taken from, or at least given to him by a god or by, a deceased loved one. This is a weapon that is his. So to an extent, I don't agree with this whole this hypocritical comment of, oh, it's all copy and paste, when in reality he's claiming that it would be better to have the same gameplay.
Back that we saw in the older games. I loved how the Chaos Blades of Blades of Chaos were just more swingy than they were in the older games, a lot faster than they are here, where it feels a little bit more sticky, especially when you hold the right bumper to pull off that combo. It never really feels smooth. It feels very clunky the way he pulls off that combo when you hold the right bumper. Now, generally, when you're swinging the blades around, you can have a good time, and they feel okay, they feel responsive enough, but it never really feels quite as good, in my opinion, as it did on the older games. And I think building upon that and building, let's say, actual combos would have been really cool. So now there's a challenge to pull off this new combo, not necessarily making it like a fighting game, but giving those more advanced players options to move in the direction of more advanced gameplay.
So I'm gonna say I've seen a couple of videos where people have really put some effort into creating combos for attacks with the Leviathan axe and the Chaos Blades. Basically mix and matching different weapon attacks as well as different specials to, let's say at one point, or at least for an extended time, have an enemy staggered for, again, an excessive amount of time. I guess ultimately it all depends on how you play and whether or not you want to experiment with, different move sets and whatnot. Again, and I think that's the point of this one, is instead of having a variety of different weapons, like a multitude of weapons that you've basically accumulated, you can go through. This is a game where you're limited to what you have, and you use your mind as well as create strategies to take down, the particular enemies with the weapons that you have and the abilities that you have.
Versus what feels to be kind of just a copy and paste of the last game. New players, though, will be happy to know that this game is really easy to pick up. It's not terribly difficult. If you click give me a story, they'll give you a story. The only downside that I find is, like, early on in the game, they don't really give you a waypoint. So, like, in the opening scene where you're, like, at the house, I did spend a little bit of time running around, and I got a couple of locations wrong as to where I could go. But the game isn't so challenging or so vast that you can't figure out where you need to go if you get turned around.
So I think this is a minor point. I mean, to an extent, I mean, with this game, I could have cared less for waypoint. I mean, it's nice sometimes, but with no waypoint, it kind of gave me a chance to explore the world, as well as, find certain dialogue options that were accessible to me when I'm exploring certain areas. Not only that, but again, it gives me a chance to locate certain things. There's a particular funny moment in I think it was Alfheim, where you go back to the Light Temple with Atreus and another character, and as you're exploring the light temple, you can hunt down treasure chests, and there's a couple of points where this particular character starts sounding irritated because they notice that you're going around searching for chests instead of the actual mission, and they start getting irritated that you're doing this instead of actually going off on the mission. It's really funny. So all in all, I mean, when it came down to it, the waypoint seemed like a non-issue, and to a degree, it gives me a chance to explore. Even if I get lost, I still get a chance to explore certain areas and kind of overlook certain locations that I didn't before. Or not overlook, but, check out certain locations that I didn't check out before.
I do wish there was always a waypoint for people who wanted one, but again, for the exploration types, it gives you a little bit of that in the opening. Not so much towards the end of the game where things are a little bit more linear, but again, it's there. Now, you'll also be proud to know that despite people being really angry about Angerboda being a black girl,
I feel like this is a non-issue too. But I kind of find it funny considering that there was a particular hot take he had about Catwoman in the Batman with Robert Pattinson.
There are no politics in this game, so for people who are trying to bash the game and say it's just politics and all that stuff, it's really not. It's a fun game that I didn't run into anything like that, so that part I can completely say when I...
By the way, it's funny that he doesn't mention another character who is also black. I just realized that. There is another character in the game that is... I can't remember what he's called, but he was introduced. I mean, you don't realize it, but he was introduced in the previous game. So, to a degree, I kind of find it funny that everybody's focusing on Angerboda, but they aren't going to talk about this other character. Oh gosh, I can't remember his name right now. That would have been great. But yeah, he was introduced. And it was cool to see him again in context of the game.
Heard people saying that. It's just wrong, because she did a great job, by the way. Angerboda, the person that played her, did fantastic. I couldn't tell you how immersive it was when that character was in the screen talking to Loki and doing all that stuff. That was a really immersive part of...
By the way, I find it funny that he was complaining about the talking segments, yet the one moment where you have talking, which is the interactions between Angerboda and Atreus, is the one he's okay with.
Of the story. And I think especially you'll appreciate it the more the story progresses, and then the more you see how things play out without getting too many spoilers on what her role is. So that I thought was really cool. Now I think we have to look at it realistically and say, like, how often are we going to play this game? That kind of determines if the game is worth anything in my book. And I think this is a good game. It's honestly, frankly, probably the best game of 2022 so far. Now that's not a compliment, because we haven't had really good games this year.
Look, I haven't played it all the way through, and I respect it for what it is. I'm not gonna bullshit and say that it's a bad game.
But this is absolutely the game.
And just because it's challenging for me, again, does not automatically make it a bad game. Unlike some people, who unfortunately I can't show on the video right now.
Game of the year this year. Despite what some people think about Elden Ring, this one takes the cake because it just does a lot to engage you enough, even though the opening is slow, that once you get the story going and you get into the game, it is fun and you have a lot of time.
By the way, that's another thing too, is he talks about challenge, or like, you know, getting motivated to play the game, when in reality, when it comes down to it, you know, games like Elden Ring is, you know, a game that will challenge you and does make you think about how to take on certain enemies, or as well as deal with certain situations, and really kind of put you in that mindset of, okay, how am I going to do this? Really put you into the mindset of you actually, like, let's say if you actually being there and like really thinking of how am I going to keep myself alive in this situation.
You're on like almost like an interest trip, like, hey, like I want to know what comes next. Like you're kind of like waiting for the next little bit as it comes, and it's a fun experience that almost anyone of any walk of life can pick up and enjoy. And I think for video games that's so important. Now again, realistically, how often would you play it? That's where we have a little bit of a problem, because they don't have chapters so you can pick your favorite parts of the story to say, you know what, I like this chapter because all the action was in this scene. If they would have done that like we see in some Tomb Raider games or even some other games, I think that would be more ideal than the kind of format that we have now. Or I think it was like Uncharted, actually. I just stick with PlayStation. Uncharted lets you pick chapters, and this really doesn't. My point being is, like, chapters aren't hard to implement. They need to work on that with these storytelling type games so we can pick what we want. Outside of that, though, it was a really fun experience, and even though it was slow in the beginning and I had a terrible time, bored out of my mind, once it gave it a little bit more time, again, coming back to it, because I'll be honest, I had to pause and come back to it, but once it came back to it, I really did have a blast, and it was a lot of fun. The puzzles are engaging, they challenge you enough, but not too much, which I can appreciate about puzzles not being too difficult, but just challenging enough. All in all, I would say this game is a solid 8 out of 10. It is a really good game, and I think a lot of people will like it. Again, there's no such thing, I think, in my opinion, as like a perfect score, and it would have been a 9 if it would have had chapters and wouldn't have been a copy and paste combat-wise as the last game. So just to kind of...
Which, again, it's... So, first, I feel that chapters is a non-issue. Again, there's playability. I'm not going to watch more of this. It's stupid. So, to an extent, I feel like chapters is a non-issue. As... Depending on how you play the game, there is playability when it comes down to the side missions that either you can complete throughout your playthrough during the story or play after. There's interactions after the game that you can do after completing the initial story. You can go after the berserkers. You can face off against one of the Valkyries that was loyal to Aden. To an extent, there is dialogue, talky stuff he doesn't like, whatever. But to an extent, there is dialogue options that are really interesting to add to the lore for this story. When it comes down to Kratos, Atreus, Freya, and everyone, one of the biggest compliments I have to give is story, especially when it comes to interaction with characters. And again, probably with one of the most emotional situations with one of my favorite characters of this game. And the unfortunate heartbreak that we have to go through with them. Again, not spoiling it. Chat or comments, don't spoil it either. Some of you might know who I'm talking about. But ultimately, it's a great game. It's funny, too, that he claims that he doesn't like it, or that it's copy and paste, when he's, again, claiming that it needs to be the same as the original games, when Norse God of War, has tried to do something different. And overall, by the way, because this is something that he doesn't focus on, has changed the character exponentially from the war-mongering asshole that he was to somebody who is somewhat more empathetic to people, to the worlds around him, to his son, and everybody else. So, I think one of the strongest suits when it comes down to this game has been story. And this is something that, unfortunately, people like Quantum TV aren't going to look at. But, hey, that's my opinion. So, with that, I'm like 50 minutes in. This has been a long video. I had a lot to say about this. I had a lot of thoughts, a lot of feelings, a lot of opinions. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. Did I go too harsh on this video? Go too long? Gave too many opinions? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Please like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. If you guys want to follow us on social media, links are in the description down below, as well as check out our daily content and the weekly podcast. With that being said, this is Novakast signing off. Have a good one. Take care. I'll see you guys next video.